Most sea mysteries begin with wreckage, a splintered hull, a distress call, a trail of debris that tells rescuers where the disaster happened. But the mystery of the Kaz II began with the opposite, a boat that was still there. When rescuers finally boarded the white catamaran drifting off the Queensland coast, they found the kind of scene that makes people stop speaking for a moment. The engine was idling, the radio and GPS were working, food and personal belongings were still on board, a laptop was open, life jackets were still where they had been stored. Everything suggested the crew had planned to return in a minute or two, except the crew was gone. There were no bodies, no clear sign of violence, no distress call explaining the moment things went wrong, just an empty yacht drifting near the Great Barrier Reef, carrying the ordinary leftovers of 3 lives that had suddenly vanished. The boat was called Kaz II, and almost immediately, Australia had a ghost story. A few days earlier, on Sunday the 15th of April 2007, Kaz II had left Apple Point Marina near Airlie Beach. On board were 3 men from Western Australia: Derek Batten, known to family and friends as Des, and 2 brothers, Peter and James Tunstead. Derek was fixed. James was 63. They were not young thrill seekers trying to prove something to the world. They were older men, family men, heading out on the kind of adventure people often talk about, but never actually do. The plan was to sail north toward Townsville, then eventually make the long journey around the top of Australia and back toward Western Australia. It was a big dream. Warm water, long horizons, the freedom of a boat moving under sail. But even before the proper beginning, there had been a false start. The day before, the men had tried to leave, only to run into trouble with their navigation equipment and course. They returned, got help entering the route manually into the GPS, and were advised to keep the first leg shorter and closer to shore. It was the sort of practical hiccup that can happen before any trip. Annoying, maybe embarrassing, but not necessarily alarming. Still, it mattered, because later, when investigators tried to understand what went wrong, those small signs would sit there in the background: the electronics confusion, the limited experience on this particular vessel, the fact that everyone wanted the journey to begin. By the next morning, they were ready to try again. People who saw Kaz II leaving said the men seemed in good spirits. One of the last phone calls from the boat was casual and warm. They were making coffee. Someone was joking about Peter injuring his foot. Nothing in that conversation sounded like fear. That is what makes the next part so haunting. At around 10:05 that morning, James Tunstead recorded video aboard the yacht. In the footage, Derek was at the helm with a blue coffee mug near him. Peter was at the back of the boat, fishing. The sea was choppy, but the mood appeared relaxed. The sails were out. A long white rope was trailing behind the vessel. The safety wires at the stern were disconnected, leaving open access to the rear steps of the catamaran. At the time, it was just holiday footage, a record of a trip beginning. Later, it became the last known moving image of the men alive. It is strange how evidence changes when you know the ending. A fishing rod is no longer just a fishing rod. A rope in the water no longer feels harmless. A coffee mug becomes a clue. The open stern becomes a place where a mistake could happen fast. Not long after that footage, something changed. Exactly what happened is still unknown. There was no camera running when it began. No one on shore saw the critical moment. No final message came through saying a man had gone overboard. But the evidence left behind pointed investigators toward a possible sequence. And it began with something painfully ordinary. A fishing lure tangled near the port side rudder. If one of the brothers noticed the line had snagged, he may have tried to free it from the back of the boat. On a calm day, tied up at a marina, that might sound simple, but Kaz II was underway. The water was lumpy. The rear steps were close to the sea. The safety wires were open. One movement too far, one badly timed wave, and a man could be in the water before anyone had time to think. If Peter fell, James would almost certainly try to help him. If James fell first, Peter may have done the same. That part can never be known with certainty, but the emotional truth is easy to understand. These were brothers. In a sudden emergency, a person does not always stop to run through a safety procedure. He reacts, he reaches, he moves toward the water. And if the second man ended up overboard too, then Derek Batten would have been left alone on the yacht, trying to save them both. That is where the situation may have become almost impossible. A man overboard recovery is difficult even with a prepared crew. Alone on a moving sailing catamaran, with wind in the sails and two friends already in the sea, every second matters. Derek would need to slow the yacht, turn it, control the sails, and get close enough for the men to grab hold. The coroner believed Derek may have started the motor and tried to bring the boat around, but to do that properly, he would have needed to drop or control the sails. If the boat changed direction in the wind, the boom could swing across the deck. A boom is not just a piece of equipment. On a sailing boat, it can become a weapon by accident, heavy, fast and silent until it hits. The blue coffee mug seen near Derek in the video was later found near the life ring. That detail matters because it suggests he may have moved from the helm toward rescue equipment. Perhaps he was trying to throw the ring. Perhaps he never got the chance. If the boom swung and knocked him overboard, then within a few terrible moments, all three men were in the sea and no one was left on Kaz II. The boat did not need to sink. It only needed to keep moving. From the water, a drifting yacht becomes cruel in a way that is hard to imagine from land. At first it is close enough to call to, then it is a few meters away, then 10, then 20. The gap grows while the men are fighting waves. Clothes, panic, age, exhaustion, and the shocking realization that the one thing that could save them is still afloat, still visible, but no longer reachable. By the time the alarm was raised, Kaz II had become something else. Not a vessel in distress, but a witness that could not speak. Search aircraft and rescue boats covered huge areas of water and coastline. Crews searched reefs, islands, and shorelines in the hope that the men had somehow made it to land. The families kept hoping too. Because hope does not end just because the official chances become small, but the sea gave nothing back. No survivors were found, no bodies were recovered, no final explanation washed ashore, and because the boat looked so strangely intact, the rumors grew quickly. Some people wondered whether another vessel had come alongside. Others imagined pirates, smugglers, a staged disappearance, or something even stranger. The media reached for the old comparison. Every ghost ship story eventually attracts the Mary Celeste, but the investigation found no evidence that anyone else had forced the men from the boat. Money and valuable equipment were still there. The firearm on board was accounted for and did not point to violence. The cabin, despite later photos showing some mess, was judged consistent with a vessel that had been towed in rough conditions, not a crime scene. The coroner was clear about one thing. He could not be absolutely definitive about the exact circumstances. No honest telling of this story should pretend otherwise. The Kaz II mystery is not solved in the neat way people want mysteries to be solved. It is not a locked room where the final clue clicks everything into place. It is more unsettling than that. It is a story where the most likely answer is also the most human one, a small problem, a rescue instinct, a second mistake, and then a final accident that left three men in the water watching their own boat drift away. That explanation does not remove the mystery. It only changes its shape because we can describe the likely sequence, but we cannot hear what they said to each other. We cannot know who fell first. We cannot know whether Derek saw the brothers in the water and believed, for a few seconds, that he could still get them back. We cannot know if the men watched Kaz II disappear, or if the sea took them before they understood what had happened. All we know is that 3 men sailed out from Airlie Beach, expecting the beginning of an adventure. And somewhere near George Point, ordinary life turned into silence. A coffee mug stayed behind, a fishing line stayed behind, a boat stayed behind, and the ocean, as it so often does, kept the rest.